to make noise, to make noise, to make noise, really.
When we say Burundi's history is murky and marred with a lot of violence, a lot of ethnic clashes and war, this is what I mean. Burundi had the coup in 1987, Burundi had an attempted coup in 1983, and Burundi had another successful coup in 1996. And what I find interesting is every leader that is elected is removed by a coup, an interim government is appointed, and then a legitimate government is put in place. But after a couple of months or a couple of years, like 2 years in this case today, the president is ousted again by a coup. Hi, welcome back to another episode on the African Footprints podcast with me, Joanna Tieno. And today's episode is not an independent episode, but a continuation of our previous episode, that is the 1993 coup attempt in Burundi.
They were, brothers and sisters together. There is no fighting here. There was plenty of Hutu, plenty of Tutsis, plenty of alien people, étranger people.
Very badly received by Burundian population. And personally, I don't believe that this can be a solution.
Today's episode is rather similar. It's another coup, but this time it was not an attempt because it was successful and the existing government was successfully ousted. Although the death toll was a little bit lower than the previous one, it was also a bit bloody because 6,000 human lives, that's still a huge number. Now, moving from 1993, we had an interim government appointed, but in April of 1994, Burundi held its election and a democratically elected president by the name Mr. Sylvestre, I won't even attempt to pronounce the second name, guys, was elected and came into office legitimately and democratically. But as fate would have it, and as we have seen is a pattern in Burundi at this time, in this, it's very volatile state, he was only president for 2 years because in 1996, another coup took place. Now, this is what's funny. I mentioned a character by the name Mr. Buyoya. Mr. Buyoya was introduced to us in 1987 when he held the interim government until the next democratically elected government was installed in 1993. This man came again and orchestrated a second coup, but this time he did it successfully. So let's just say he has a knack for coups and he's damn good at it. So maybe we should consider him if we ever want to have one. That's beside the point. So in 1993, the tension between the Hutus and the Tutsis was still growing. Like, it had not stopped. So I wouldn't even say they were growing. They had been in existence from before, and especially after the coup attempt in 1993, which led to the death of the Hutu president. The Hutus were still angry. There was a lot of animosity, a lot of hostility between the Hutus and the Tutsis, and the war continued among these two tribes. And because of this, the tension was seen and felt across the entire country. So what happened was Mr. Buyoya felt the new government, again, has done nothing to calm the ethnic clashes that were happening in the country. And secondly, this guy was not just happy with this regime. I think maybe he felt he could rule better, but was just never given a legitimate chance and felt he should take it. And I think, as we had said in one episode, sometimes power is not given, power is taken. Rightly so. But in this case, I think he was overdoing it a little bit. But so as time went by, Major Buyoya felt this government is just not giving in terms of Gen Z language. And him, together with his counterparts, decided to orchestrate another coup. Now, this was the plan. One, they were going to take over the presidential palace, again, of course, the sitting house of the president, and this time they didn't plan to kill the president. They just planned to oust the president and install their government, a government by the Tutsis. Now, what led to this? At around in July, so to speak, the president was out of the country for official business, and on 21st July, there was an attack on a refugee camp, which led to a lot of Tutsis being killed. And this attack was orchestrated by Hutu members, or so it was suspected. It has never been confirmed, neither has it ever been proven, so we might never know. But that was the assertion at that time. The Hutus attacked a refugee camp and ended up killing a lot of Tutsis. Now, this refugee camp, as I had stated in the previous episode, there was a lot of migration of Hutus and Tutsis between Rwanda and Burundi. 1987, the coup happened. A lot of people moved to Rwanda. Then they came back when a Hutu president was elected, and they thought there would be some sense of calm, some sense of peace. So they came back into the country. But in 1993, again, after the election of the president, just a few months later, there was another attempted coup, and it was very hostile, which led to so many people dying, hundreds of thousands. So there was another migration to Rwanda. But sadly for them, in 1994, there was the genocide that happened in Rwanda, the Hutus and the Tutsis. And there was migration again of the Burundian Tutsis back into Burundi. Now, because of this, there was a lot of displaced persons, and therefore refugee camps were not a new sight. They were very common across the country, and they were set in various places, and the government would often support them here and there. So, with a lot of Tutsi members in the refugee camps, please note that it's not only Tutsis who are in the refugee camps, also Hutus were in these refugee camps, but a lot of Tutsis were in the refugee camps, and the one that was attacked specifically had so many Tutsis. So when the Hutus were suspected to have attacked it, again, war broke. So Mr. Buyoya assembled his troops, and they decided to wage war against the Hutus. They killed a couple of Hutus, and 6,000 people ended up losing their lives, most of them being Hutus. Remember, I had said Mr. Buyoya was a Tutsi, so he felt, we are the high and mighty, and therefore this government should be ours, and things like that. So once he organized this coup, he started having political ambitions, and I think this got the best of him, because after the killing of 300 Tutsis in the refugee camp, he felt this was the right time to orchestrate a coup. Now, a lot of people argue, and I side with them, there was really no concrete reason, because the president was just 2 years in. There was really nothing that he had done to offend these people. There was really nothing that he had done against the military people again. And I suspect Buyoya might have been part of the 1993 coup, because, this guy and coups. So all this happened, and he organizes this particular coup. Now, on 23rd of July, 1996, he sets out now to have the full-blown coup. He goes into the capital, goes into Bunjumbura together with his officers, and again, they start shooting randomly, they start killing people, all in the name of getting the president to step down. That was, at first, the goal. Getting the president to step down, and they can step up and have a military regime. And they were working together with the Minister of Defense Forces at this time. So, as they were progressing into the capital, making their way to the presidential palace, the president was smart enough, having learned from history, took off and hid and sought refuge in the U.S. embassy. And as you would understand, of course, international law and how these embassies operate, an embassy is essentially a representation, a physical representation of a particular country in another state. So the U.S. embassy is technically or figuratively U.S. soil. So if I go to the U.S. embassy right now in Kenya, I am on U.S. grounds. And therefore, any attack on the embassy is an attack directly on the United States. And therefore, they are free to retaliate and protect their space. So because he had gone into hiding in the U.S. embassy at the ambassador's residence, then he could not really be caught. So they proceeded with their killings across the street, across the town in Bunjumbura. And as this happened, the president over there was strategizing, having a lot of communication with international organizations and various international bodies on how he would regain power. So unlike the 1993 coup, government officials were not really targeted. The target was just the power seat, removing the president and taking over. But this would not be the case, because after 2 days after the president had escaped, that is on 25th July, the Minister of Defense Forces again went to the radio stations. I wish we had TVs then, because this drama would have been live, but yeah, went to the radio station and declared that a coup had taken place and the president had been ousted, and now the military regime is taking over. So people were given certain orders: stay in your homes as usual, as the military officers patrol the streets and all that, because it can get bloody. So stay in your homes, nobody should come out. Certain provisions of the constitution were suspended again, because you pick and choose what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And that is the problem with coups, unlike democracy, because with democracy you don't pick and choose what works for you, you go with what is there. So as this was happened, Buyoya was then declared as the interim president. And as he was declared the interim president, they were supposed to sit down and decide when the next election would be. But as fate would have it, I do not think he was meant to be as successful as he did in the 1987 coup, because a few days later, the president re-emerged and took over government with a fraction of military that was for the government, a fraction of the military that was pro-government, or the fraction that did not work with Mr. Buyoya and the Minister of Defense. So they took over, and the president later on announced that, like Moi did, serikali imerudi mikononi mwa Mr. Sylvestre. And a lot of international bodies supported Mr. Sylvestre. And of course, when international bodies support you, you start to think you're wrong. But in this case, I think it was just them acting pro-democracy, because he was a democratically elected leader. Now, as things would progress, the ethnic clashes between the Hutus and the Tutsis did not die down, even as Mr. Sylvestre continued with his term until the next leaders were appointed in 2003. He held that position until 2003. He was president until that time. The political tensions and the ethnic tensions in Burundi did not die down until around 2005, when the ethnic clashes essentially ceased. There was a lot of peace communications and peace interventions by UN and other international bodies, and there was also a lot of interventions by civil societies within the country, and various organizations just played a part in making sure the Hutus and the Tutsis live harmoniously. But for me, this story was interesting, because for a country as small as Burundi, it's not such a big country, it's not highly populated. You would think democracy would thrive, right? Because they're very sober people. They elect very rational leaders. But I came to discover that it's a country with a rather dark past, from a dictatorial regime to ethnic clashes, to a regime that supported the ethnic clashes, and some even provided weapons and arms for some of the rebellious groups, to the displaced persons every now and then because of the migration of the Hutus and Tutsis between Rwanda, Burundi, and even as far as Uganda and other countries across the East Africa. And I think at this point they have achieved some calm, although recently, like we had said in the previous episode, there was another coup attempt, again, not successful. But I think it's time, because this season we've been talking a lot about coups, and we've seen various coups across various countries in Africa, the reasons why those coups took place, and the reasons why some of them succeeded and some of them failed. I think it's time maybe to just give it a rest and give democracy a chance. Of course, our democracy is not straight, it's not clear, it's marred with a lot of corruption, a lot of scandals here and there, a lot of theft, grand theft, a lot of white-collar crime. But I think it's better than bloodshed, because in as much as the number was low, it was 6,000 people losing their lives against 100 to 150,000, the number in the previous coup not being specific, some reports even saying 116,000. Still, 6,000 lives, like I have said, 6,000 lives is still a lot of human lives to be lost simply because someone has political ambitions, someone is not happy with the incumbent, someone feels like their tribe deserves more than another tribe. But anyway, with all these coups and with all these ethnic clashes and wars, it's a lesson not just for Burundi or Rwanda, but it's a lesson for the larger Africa, and a lesson for the world at large. So I hope we pick the right lessons from this. I hope the lessons sink in, especially for Burundi, because these guys have had a bloody past. We thought Rwanda was bad. Burundi came in very close. So yeah, I guess that's also a story you need to look into. Remember the ones I've said, the 1987 coup in Burundi, the 1993 attempted coup, and the 1996 coup as well in Burundi. So maybe you can have a look into those, and maybe let us know your comments. And if you have any other coups that you feel we should highlight, or coups that you feel we should talk about, and even if you're a storyteller and you want to appear on one of our episodes, kindly let us know. Remember to watch, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your friends to also join. Thank you for joining us. Bye.